We live surrounded by things so ordinary, we hardly notice them. Forks, post-it notes, toothbrushes, tape, you name it. They sit quietly in our kitchens, bathrooms, and desks, doing their jobs without fuss. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find many of these household MVPs have bizarre, funny, or even scandalous histories. In this collection of 25 stories, I'm going to pull back the curtain on everyday items and tell you what's hiding in their pasts. And somewhere in the mix, there's an invention that was created just to pay off a measly $15 debt, but ended up changing the world. Curious? Well, stick around, because I'm Mike with List 25, and here are 25 unexpected backstories of common household items. But before we get started, as always, like, share, comment, subscribe, notification bell, really helps the channel. Thanks you guys so much. Let's go. 25. The fork. For most of history, the fork was considered scandalous. Ancient Greeks and Romans had versions of it, but in medieval Europe, eating with a fork was seen as ridiculous and even blasphemous. Why would anyone insult God's design of giving us fingers by sticking food on a pronged piece of metal? The Byzantine princess Theodora brought forks to Venice in the 11th century, and people were horrified, whispering that her strange utensil habits caused her early death. Fast forward to the 1500s, Catherine de' Medici carried her forks into French court, and nobles started quietly copying her. By the 18th century, the fork finally became an everyday table tool. Funny enough, the object we now treat as essential for civilized dining was once the symbol of arrogance and sin. 24. The microwave oven. The humble microwave is the king of leftovers and late-night snacks, but its origin story is pure science fiction level accident. In 1945, Percy Spencer, an engineer at Raytheon, was tinkering with magnetrons, tubes used in radar technology. One day, as he stood near one of these buzzing contraptions, he noticed the chocolate bar in his pocket had melted into a gooey mess. Instead of being annoyed, he became curious. He grabbed popcorn kernels, which immediately popped when exposed to the microwaves. Spencer realized he'd stumbled upon a whole new way to cook. The first commercial microwave ovens were massive, expensive, and water-cooled, but by the 70s, countertop versions were everywhere. It's funny to think that a melted candy bar gave birth to the ultimate convenience appliance. Without that happy accident, we might still be stuck reheating pizza in a frying pan and waiting ages for it to warm through. 23. The rubber band. Rubber bands feel so ordinary, until you learn that their debut was a game changer for the newspaper business. In 1845, Stephen Perry patented the rubber band in England. While its uses seem obvious now, the first big customers weren't office workers or school kids, it was London's newspaper industry. Delivery boys needed a way to keep papers from flying apart in the windy streets, and stretchy loops were perfect. Before that, papers were tied with string or left loose, often arriving in a mess. Rubber bands turned out to be stronger, reusable, and far less fussy. From there, the little loops spread to households, offices, and eventually that junk drawer we all have, tangled with dozens of them. Funny how a problem as small as newspapers falling apart gave us one of the most ubiquitous tools in our homes today. Even stranger, most of us still can't throw them away. Sometimes invention comes from solving a practical mess. 22. The tea bag. Like many great things in life, the tea bag was a happy accident. In the early 1900s, New York tea merchant Thomas Sullivan was looking for a cheap, tidy way to send out tea samples. Instead of tins, he used small silk bags filled with loose tea leaves. Customers assumed they were supposed to dunk the whole pouch into hot water, and, well, it worked so well they kept asking for more. Sullivan had accidentally invented a revolution in tea making. Over time, the silk gave way to gauze, and then paper filter bags, and the ritual of tea making shifted forever. Not everyone was thrilled, though. Traditionalists grumbled that bagged tea lacked the sophistication of loose leaves. But convenience won the day, and now billions of cups are brewed this way daily, all thanks to one guy's packaging experiment. It's a reminder that sometimes people use your product in ways you never expected. 21. The toothbrush. Our ancestors didn't exactly have minty fresh smiles. Long before plastic brushes lined drugstore shelves, people chewed on twigs known as chew sticks. The frayed ends worked like bristles, scrubbing teeth and gums. In China, during the 1400s, inventors took it up a notch and attached hog bristles to bamboo or bone handles. These early toothbrushes spread slowly, eventually reaching Europe, though nobles often preferred cloths or powders. The switch to nylon bristles didn't come until 1938, when DuPont introduced them as a modern hygienic upgrade. George Washington, by the way, reportedly used chew sticks, though they couldn't save him from his famously bad teeth. Today's toothbrush is sleek, colorful, sometimes electric, and often marketed like a tech gadget. But its core job hasn't changed much: scrubbing gunk off teeth. Kind of strange to think that a tool that we take for granted every morning and night started as someone gnawing on a stick. 20. The Post-it note. Imagine working hard to invent the strongest glue in the world and ending up with the weakest. That's what happened to Dr. Spencer Silver at 3M in 1968. Instead of despairing, he held on to his odd adhesive, though nobody knew what to do with it. Years later, colleague Art Fry realized he could use the glue to keep his bookmark in place in his church hymnal. He could peel the slip of paper off without damaging the pages, then re-stick it again and again and again. Suddenly, Silver's failure had a purpose. Post-it notes hit the market in the 80s and exploded in popularity. Offices, classrooms, and homes filled with neon squares plastered on walls, screens, and desks. What started as a scientific disappointment became one of the most iconic office supplies ever. Not bad for an accident. And it proves that weak glue can sometimes hold the strongest place in our routines. 19. The spoon. Before forks and knives became dining essentials, spoons ruled the table. In fact, they're among humanity's oldest utensils, dating back to prehistoric times. In the past, spoons were made of shells, stones, or pieces of wood, not silver or stainless steel. The ancient Egyptians made fancy versions out of ivory and wood, and they typically had religious symbols on them. By the Middle Ages, wealthy Europeans flaunted spoons made of precious metals, while the poor stuck with wood. The word spoon itself comes from an Old Norse word meaning chip of wood. Over time, spoons evolved into all sorts of variations: teaspoons, tablespoons, dessert spoons, and even weirdly specific ones like grapefruit spoons with serrated edges. It's easy to overlook them now, but spoons have been human companions for thousands of years. They've changed from tools for survival to status symbols to everyday cutlery. When you stir your coffee next time, think about how you're just holding a piece of history. 18. The clock. We think of clocks as background objects, quiet tick-tocks on a wall. But the first mechanical household clocks were anything but subtle. These big machines were invented in the 14th century and made a lot of noise, so they were generally kept in separate rooms. Rich families put them up as signs of wealth, not because they were accurate. Many were off by hours. The invention of the pendulum by Christian Huygens in the 1600s changed everything, bringing accuracy and quieter mechanisms. Suddenly, timekeeping became practical instead of ornamental. In the 18th and 19th centuries, regular residences began to have smaller, cheaper clocks. Time itself became something people had to plan around, which changed how people live today. It's funny to think that our forefathers put up with loud, wrong machines only to find out what time it was. Today's digital clocks are silent, cheap, and forgettable, but they're descended from a tradition that was once noisy and elite. 17. The match. The simple match has a fiery backstory. Literally. John Walker, an English chemist, was in his lab in 1826 when he scraped a stick that had his mixture on it. The tip suddenly burst into flames, shocking him. He hadn't set out to make a fire starter, but he realized the commercial potential right away. His friction lights became an instant hit, sold in little boxes with sandpaper strips for ignition. Of course, early matches weren't exactly safe. They produced noxious fumes and could ignite unpredictably. Later improvements made them more reliable, and match factories sprang up everywhere. For centuries, matches were the go-to method for lighting candles, stoves, and lamps, until lighters and electric starters started taking over. Still, there's something magical about striking a match and watching the fire spring from wood and phosphorus. All thanks to one chemist's messy experiment and a lucky scrape of the stick. 16. The safety pin. Believe it or not, the safety pin owes its existence to a man trying to get out of debt. In 1849, American mechanic Walter Hunt had to repay $15. Desperate, he tinkered with a piece of wire until he bent it into a springy clasp with a protective cover. He patented it, sold the rights for $400, and settled his debt. What he didn't realize? The buyer went on to make a fortune because the safety pin became an everyday necessity. Hunt essentially invented one of the most useful little tools in history and then walked away from the profits. The pin became indispensable for clothing, baby diapers, and emergency fixes, even inspiring punk fashion in the 70s, all from one guy's side hustle to pay off a measly debt. There's a bit of irony here. Hunt secured everyone else's fortunes, just not his own. 15. The Q-tip. Q-tips weren't born in a laboratory. They were inspired in a nursery. In the 20s, Leo Gerstenzang watched his wife wrap cotton around a toothpick to clean their baby's ears. He thought, hey, this could be safer and easier. He designed a wooden stick tipped with cotton and sold it under the charmingly odd name Baby Gaze. Eventually, the brand rebranded as Q-tips, Q short for quality, and they became a household staple. Of course, doctors have spent decades telling people not to shove them in their ears, but most of us ignore the warnings. Beyond ears, they've been used for cleaning electronics, applying makeup, and crafting. It's one of those objects that started as a parenting hack and grew into a multi-purpose tool found in nearly every bathroom cabinet. And it all began with a husband watching his wife's improvised baby care routine. 14. The ballpoint pen. Picture this. You're a journalist in the 30s, constantly frustrated by leaky fountain pens that smudge your notes. That was the life of Laszlo Biro, a Hungarian reporter. Along with his brother, he invented a pen that used quick-drying ink in a tiny rolling ball to distribute it smoothly. The ballpoint was born. Early models weren't perfect. Airlines banned them because they leaked at high altitude, but the design improved fast. By the 50s, they were affordable, reliable, and everywhere. The pen became such a phenomenon that biro is still the common word for ballpoint in many countries. It's funny to think that one man's annoyance with messy ink reshaped how the world writes. From scribbled grocery lists to signing treaties, the ballpoint pen is a small miracle of engineering, and proof that sometimes the best inventions come from someone just being fed up. 13. The vacuum cleaner. The first powered vacuum cleaner was so huge, it needed a horse. In 1901, Hubert Cecil Booth's invention was mounted on a horse-drawn cart and parked outside homes. Long hoses snaked through windows while the massive machine wheezed and roared, sucking up dirt. Wealthy clients treated it as a spectacle. Neighbors would gather just to watch carpets being cleaned. Over time, vacuums shrank, becoming portable enough for households. By the 20s, brands like Hoover had turned them into a middle-class staple, with door-to-door salesmen pushing them as must-have appliances. Today's robot vacuums would seem like science fiction to Booth, who probably couldn't imagine a disc-shaped gadget quietly scooting around a living room. But in a way, they share DNA with that first horse-drawn behemoth. From clunky status symbol to quiet household servant, the vacuum cleaner's journey is a perfect example of technology getting smaller, faster, and smarter. 12. The paper towel. Paper towels came about by mistake. In 1907, a paper company in Philadelphia made a batch of toilet paper that was too thick and rough. Instead of scrapping it, they rebranded the rolls as disposable towels for household cleaning and drying. The idea stuck. Paper towels were a cleaner option than cloth towels that had to be washed and shared. By the 30s, companies heavily marketed them towards housewives as the modern easy choice. Over the decades, the humbled paper towel became a cleaning essential, evolving into perforated rolls we tear off without thinking. They've sparked debates too. Eco-conscious folks point out the waste compared to reusable cloth, but still, it's hard to deny the convenience when you're dealing with a sudden spill. All thanks to one production mistake, households gained a product that's now practically impossible to live without. 11. Velcro. Velcro owes its existence to a man and his dog's bad luck with burrs. In 1941, Swiss engineer Georges de Mestral went for a walk and returned home covered in the pesky plant seeds. Curious, he examined them under a microscope and saw their tiny hook structures. He was inspired to make a fabric system with hooks on one side and loops on the other. It took years of work to make Velcro. People thought it was ugly and useless at first and scoffed at it. But once NASA started to use it in the 60s to secure objects in zero gravity, Velcro suddenly looked cool. From sneakers to wallets to blood pressure cuffs, it found a home everywhere. What started as a nuisance during a walk in the woods became a fascinating system that reshaped industries. Pretty sure that's also how the astronauts scratch their nose. They put a piece of Velcro on their helmet so they can go like that, because obviously they can't use their hands. 10. The zipper. The zipper story begins not with pants, but with pouches. The earliest version appeared in the late 1800s, designed by Whitcomb Judson to fasten boots and tobacco bags. It was clunky, unreliable, and didn't really catch on. Enter Gideon Sundback, a Swedish-American engineer who refined the design in 1913 into the zipper we know today. Even then, it didn't immediately become a hit. Buttons were still considered more fashionable. But once the fashion industry embraced zippers for dresses and jackets in the 20s and 30s, they became unstoppable. The US military also used them for gear during World War II, boosting their reputation for toughness. It's strange to think that such a small, fussy invention would become so universal. Every time you zip up your hoodie or backpack, you're using a tool that started as a failed boot fastener and grew into an invisible hero of daily life. Also a fly from Rescue Rangers. 9. The dishwasher. The first practical dishwasher wasn't made by an engineer nor a scientist, but by a woman who was simply fed up. In 1886, Josephine Cochran, a wealthy socialite, was annoyed that her servants kept chipping her fine china. A classic issue we all deal with. Determined to find a solution, she designed a machine with wire racks to hold dishes and a water wheel to spray them clean. Her invention was shown at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, where it impressed onlookers. At first, dishwashers were mostly used in hotels and restaurants, since they were bulky and expensive. But by the mid-20th century, smaller electric versions entered middle-class kitchens. Today, they're so common we hardly think about them. Except when we're debating who has to unload it. Josephine's frustration over broken plates led to a device that revolutionized kitchens everywhere, proving that sometimes the best inventions come from sheer annoyance. 8. The umbrella. Umbrellas have been around for thousands of years, but their reputation hasn't always been dry and respectable. In ancient civilizations like Egypt and China, they were symbols of status and shade rather than rain protection. When they finally made their way into rainy 18th century England, men mocked them as effeminate accessories. Carriage drivers in particular hated them, since umbrellas threatened their business. Why hire a ride when you could walk dry? It took pioneers like Jonas Hanway, an English gentleman who famously carried one everywhere despite ridicule, to make them respectable. By the 19th century, umbrellas had become mainstream. Today, we see them as practical tools, but their early history is tangled with class, gender, and even taxi rivalries. Next time you pop one open in the rain, remember, once upon a time, you could have been laughed at for it. 7. Glass windows. It's easy to take glass for granted, but for most of history, ordinary homes couldn't dream of them. In medieval times, glass was expensive and reserved for churches or palaces. Common households used oiled paper, cloth, or even thin slices of animal horn to let in light while blocking drafts. It wasn't until the 17th and 18th centuries that glass production improved enough to make panes affordable for middle-class families. Even then, windows were small and precious. Breaking one was a huge deal. Windows changed over the years, becoming bigger, clearer, and stronger. This changed how homes appeared and felt. Imagine living in a dark, smoky hut with only a hole covered in oiled paper for light. Then suddenly you have a room with glass panes that get sunlight. That shift must have felt like magic. Today, we barely notice them, until one cracks and ruins our day. 6. Tupperware. Tupperware wasn't just an invention. It was a cultural movement. In the 40s, Earl Tupper created airtight plastic containers that kept food fresh far longer than traditional storage. The product was clever, but it didn't sell well in stores. Enter Brownie Wise, a savvy saleswoman who pioneered the Tupperware party model. She invited women into living rooms, showed off the product, and turned selling into a social event. It worked great, bringing together a group of women who could make money and develop a community at the same time. By the 50s, Tupperware was a household name and a way of life, not just a product. Wise even graced the cover of Business Week, a rarity for women back then. Tupperware's story isn't just about plastic bowls, it's about empowerment, marketing genius, and the surprising power of parties. Next time you burp a lid shut, you're sealing a little piece of history. 5. Scotch Tape. Scotch Tape was born in the 30s thanks to auto painters. Richard Drew, a 3M engineer, invented it while trying to help painters get clean lines between two colors of paint. The adhesive strip proved useful far beyond cars. People began using it for household repairs during the Great Depression. When World War II hit, Scotch Tape became a hero on the home front, used to patch windows, fix books, and even repair boots. Its transparent design made it especially appealing. Over time, it became the go-to solution for wrapping presents, sealing envelopes, and holding together just about anything in a pinch. That little roll sitting in your drawer is more than just sticky plastic. It's a relic of ingenuity born from the struggles of the 20th century. Who knew a product designed for paint jobs would become one of the most beloved fix-it tools on Earth? 4. The light bulb. The story of the light bulb is often credited to Thomas Edison, but he didn't invent it. He just perfected it. Dozens of inventors had tried making electric lights before him, but the bulbs burned out quickly or were too impractical for home use. Edison's big breakthrough in 1879 was finding the right filament material, eventually carbonized bamboo, that could glow for hundreds of hours. This made bulbs practical for everyday households. Electricity soon replaced gas lamps and candles. The bulb didn't just make rooms brighter, it changed the way people lived, changed the way cities looked, and powered whole industries. Today, we're going through another change. This time from Edison filaments to LEDs and smart lamps. The premise is still the same. You can flip on the lights and make it day. All because one inventor figured out how to make a fragile little bulb last. 3. The refrigerator. Before refrigerators, people relied on ice boxes. Literally insulated boxes filled with giant chunks of ice delivered by the Iceman. Food spoiled quickly, and summer was especially brutal for keeping perishables fresh. Electric freezers first came out in the early 1900s, but they were big, expensive, and occasionally dangerous because coolants were toxic. By the 30s, they were safer and used Freon gas, making them ideal for residential use. People could now preserve milk, meat, and leftovers for much longer, changing how they ate and bought. The fridge became the most important part of the modern kitchen. It soon grew to include freezers, ice makers, and water dispensers. It's funny to think how radical it was for families to have cold drinks and week-old leftovers on demand. Today, refrigerators are so ordinary that we barely notice them humming away until they break down and life becomes chaotic. 2. Laundry detergent. Soap shortages during World War II sparked a quiet revolution in cleaning. Traditional soaps were made from fats and oils, which were redirected to the war effort. Chemists scrambled to find alternatives, and out of that scramble came synthetic detergents. These new cleaners functioned differently. Instead of just reacting with grease, they broke it down chemically, which made them operate better in hard water. After the war, detergent companies like Tide flooded the market with promises of whiter whites and brighter colors. Suddenly, laundry became less labor-intensive and more efficient. Housewives no longer had to wrestle with boiling cloths or scrubbing endlessly. Detergents paved the way for washing machines to become truly effective. What started as a wartime necessity reshaped everyday life. Every time you toss in a pot or pour in liquid detergent, you're benefiting from an invention born in a moment of global crisis. 1. The remote control. The first TV remote wasn't wireless or sleek. It was a tripping hazard. In the 50s, Zenith introduced the Lazy Bones, which let viewers change channels from their couch using a remote connected by a long cable. Families loved the convenience, but hated the mess of cords snaking across the living room. Soon after, Zenith engineer Eugene Poley created the Flashmatic, a wireless remote that used beams of light. It wasn't perfect. Sunlight may mess up the TV, but it was the first step toward the infrared remotes we use now. The remote changed the way people watch TV by letting them control it from the couch. It even influenced channel surfing culture, where attention spans shortened and advertising had to adapt. Today's remotes can command entire smart homes, but their ancestor was a clunky box that literally tied people to their TVs. Not exactly lazy, more like cautiously liberated. And that's all I have for you guys today. But I do have one little bonus trivia for you. Did you know the world's longest burning light bulb, nicknamed the Centennial Light, has been glowing almost non-stop since 1901 in a fire station in Livermore, California? Well, you do now. And if you like this list, well, there's something surprising about these items because there's some secret features you didn't know about, so check out this video. And as always, like I said, like, share, comment, subscribe, notification bell, and I will catch you guys later.